We still have about 6 people to come. Are there any questions at all before we get everybody here from the people that are on?
Yes. Yes. I would like to know what the brand of the 50, the the 50 counts slide feeder. What was it, a Panasonic or an Epson or
No, it's a Nikon.
Nikon? Okay, thank you.
Mary Jo, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am well, thank you.
Good, good.
We're still waiting for a few, but if you have any questions at all, we can use this time to answer some.
I don't at this point.
Okay. Terry, I can see you now.
Yes, I had my camera covered.
I want to do some actual scanning tonight. I'm not sure that you'll be able to see my scanner because it's a little bit out of the field of view and it's hard to get all of this paraphernalia together, but I'll talk about what's happening and I think you can all follow that way. Did anybody get scanners in the past week?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, maybe we should get started at 6:30. What I would like to do is to actually do a scan of some a black and white print, and in several different modes, in the basic real easy mode, and then in the professional mode using ViewScan. And then the second thing I would like to do is to scan some negatives, and then finally scan some slides, just so you get an idea. And because most of us are dealing with flatbed scanners, I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm not gonna scan on my Nikon slide scanner or any of the other ones. I may use the automatic feeder on one of the scanners just to give you an idea of what that will do. But so let's get started. And actually kind of funny because the other day, you can all see this print. This is a print that I just found that was taken in 1970. And it's me in the Army at an electron microscope facility in a research lab. And I just came across this the other day. And it has something on the back and it has something on the front. So I'm going to actually see if I can get out of this screen and open up the ViewScan screen. Let's see if that's somebody coming on. That is somebody coming on here. Okay. So I have to keep an eye on that at the same time. So bear with me. So let's see if I can flip over to the ViewScan screen. And now you should all see my ViewScan screen. Can you all see that?
Yep.
At the top, it says overview and cropped area, and you probably see a little thumbnail of me. And what I am going to do is to actually put this print face down on my flatbed scanner and shut the lid. Now let's see if we got somebody else coming on here. I don't think so. Oh, I do. Okay, we got one more person coming in. Now, if you look at the upper left here on my scanner screen, it says professional now. I'm going to back off to the basic scanning mode, which is the real easy way to, if people just want to scan something real quick, this is the scanning. This is the easy mode. And we've got a couple of things here. One, it says, what's our source? Well, if you look down here, when did that screen come up that says 4 different things underneath the scanner?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Then
Yeah.
you can see what I'm seeing, but you'll have to tell me if you can't see exactly what I'm seeing, and I'll see if we can make that work. Okay, so I'm going to choose the Perfection 600, which is my Epson scanner. And the next screen down, or the next option down, is do I want to do a flatbed scan or do I want to do a transparency scan? Transparency scan means I'm going to do a slide, like one of these Ektachrome, Kodachrome slides, or I'm going to do a negative, like one of these negatives. Well, we're going to start out just doing a print. So we're going to say flatbed. And the next thing down, we have an option of doing black and white text, color print, gray print, which is black and white. And that's what I suggest you use for a black and white print, gray. The next one down will be media size, and we can do either auto, or we can choose a size. Well, I'm going to default to 8.5 by 11 because that's about what it is, but we're going to go down and we're going to actually set that exactly. We have a choice of doing bits per pixel. Now, in the interest of saving time, so we're not all sitting here waiting for 10 minutes for each scan, I'm going to set this for 8-bit gray. If I was scanning this for something that I'd want to keep, I would probably choose the highest resolution. So I would choose probably 16-bit gray. But again, I'm going to choose a faster scan so we can see what's happening. The next one down is the scan resolution. And again, if I was scanning this for a print that I want to make down the line, or for archiving, I'd be up around 3200 or 6400, but I'll do this at 400 DPI, which will do a quicker scan. Rotation, basically, I'm going to say none. And then it's going to say, what's my default folder? Where do I want this scan to go? And this is where you all want to get some kind of organizational system going for your scans. So I'm going to look at where this can go. And I have this going to an external drive. For those of you with Macs, you know this scenario over on the left here. I'm going to go to this external drive. And I have a folder on here. It's not alphabetized. It's set up by the way the date modified. I'll alphabetize this so you can see what I've got on here. I'm going to go down to scans. And these are all of my scanning folders, which is quite a few now. I start scanning with 1966. Actually, I have much things older than that, but because I've been doing negatives and slides, I've divvied these up by years. We're going to go all the way down to something called scans for scanning class. And that's where it's going to send my scan. And then it's going to say, do you want to do this? Do you want the output to be a PDF file? If you'd want to send somebody a PDF document, you can choose that. Do you want to send it as a JPEG, which is the standard format for images? Or do we want to send this as a TIFF? Now, for those of you that want to do extensive post-processing, you might want to choose TIFF. I'm only going to do minimal post-processing with a picture like this. If this was an 1850 terribly scratched, faded print, I might choose TIFF to post-process it. But for anything that's reasonably good looking, I'll choose JPEG. And then finally, we're going to name this something. Well, this is me in the Army in 1970. So I've chosen a default title here, and I'm going to call it JFK for me, EM for electron microscope, and then 1970. And then this is a very neat thing about ViewScan. If you notice the number that I gave it 001 plus. And I can get rid of the JPEG here because that will come back up. So I'm going to call this 0051 plus because I've been scanning things all day and I've already given some of these numbers. And then I'm going to say, let's preview this. Now I'm hoping that you'll all see what's happening here and that it's not making another overlay screen. But let's see what's happening. And what this will do, if you can see what came up on the screen, it says calibrating. And can you all see this preview?
Yes.
Did that show? Oh, good. Okay, now this is sideways. I don't want to sit here and turn my head and look at this. So down at the bottom here, we have a couple of controls. One of them is to flip it left. One of them is to flip it right 90 degrees. So let's just flip this right. And on the right there is, you are seeing me some 50 years ago in the Army. And I'm going to crop this. Now, you might ask why I've cropped it so tight. With ViewScan and with all other scanning software, if you get a lot of the side in, for example, if we get a lot of this white, it's going to change the exposure. And I want this to be as well exposed as possible. And it's basically a light meter and a camera on the film scanner bed. So I'm going to slide this right past these white borders. And if everything looks good, I'm going to say scan. And this is going to go through a very short scan cycle here because I'm doing it at a low resolution just so you can see what it looks like. And it goes pretty quickly. And so here's my scan. And let me see if I can call up one more screen here. I'm going to get out of this screen. And I'm going to call up another screen to show you where I sent it. Now, you should see a bunch of little pictures there. Can you all see that?
Mhm, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so down here on the very bottom is the picture that I just scanned. And I actually scanned that earlier today. Now, from this picture, we can go and we can post-process it. We can do any sort of number of things to it. We can email it to somebody. We can say that's as good as we want to get it, or we can edit it and make it a little bit better, like this one that I did earlier today, or this one where I actually edited the one that you see highlighted in Photoshop. So now this one that's a little darker, I changed the contrast and I changed the white point, and I've edited that, I've post-processed that. Somebody sent me an email today and asked me if ViewScan does a finalized output. Well, I guess that depends on how good your original scan is. There may be points where, and let me just bring up one of these. I'm going to open this up with an editor. And I'm opening this up with Photoshop. I'm going to have to show you that screen separately because I can't get more than one screen at a time here. So let's bring up the Photoshop scan of this. And okay, so here's the Photoshop scan of this. Now, I'm going to magnify this a little bit. And you can see some artifacts here. Can you all see that blown up?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so here's some dust spots and scratches, and there's a little white spot here. You can go in and you can get rid of those in Photoshop with a healing brush or with any other program. We can get rid of those scratches, and we can make it a little bit darker. We can make it a little bit brighter. I'm not going to do a lot, but I just want to give you an idea. But we can make this picture a little bit darker. Let's see if I can call up a filter here. I'm going to do this real quick so you can get an idea of what's happening here. Okay, so I just made this darker real quickly. So that's, our original one's a little bit lighter than that, but this is just a quick edit in Photoshop to give you an idea. So that's the basic scan process. I'm going to go back to my ViewScan screen if I can find it. So now we're back at the ViewScan screen, and let's switch over from the basic. I'm going to skip over the standard setting, and I'm going to go right to the professional. And if you look at the top here, we have two tabs. We have input and preferences. Now, when I go to the professional setting, which is the one that I do almost all of my scanning in, we now have 6 tabs at the top. So we've got a tremendous number of different things we can do here. We can add a filter, and this filter really is best for color prints, but some black and whites it'll work on. There's something called grain reduction. So for those of you that have done old black and whites and know what grain looks like, this actually helps that. We can have it sharpened a little bit. The next one down, the 5th one down here says descreen. If you have newspaper pictures that you want to scan, that takes care of those dots. But I don't use descreen for black and white prints. I only use it for newspapers. So let's now look at this, and here's our output. Now we could actually also scan this in as a PDF file. So I can scan this as a JPEG. I could scan it as a TIFF, which I'm not going to do at this time, but it might be interesting to see what this looks like as a PDF. If you so desire to do that, then you'll have a PDF that you can put right into a publication without any editing or saving or changing the format. And again, if you see down here now, we have a new option that says description. This is really invaluable for those of you that are planning on scanning in tons of things, because now we have a searchable field. So I typed in here just arbitrarily JFK for my initials, Army, and electron microscope. So 10 years from now, if I would like to see all the pictures of an electron microscope, I can search for electron microscope, and it will look through all of the pictures that I've done and maybe tagged, and lo and behold, we'll be able to call up this very picture. And again, that just makes things a little bit easier to search for, because we've tagged that. You will never see those tags in the final output, but it's there in your file. So let's scan this again, and I'm going to preview it again. And because I haven't moved it, there's the same crops. So let's scan this again. And the result's going to be the same. It's just that we had several different options we could do, which for this picture, really, we could have scanned it either way. I tend to like the more comprehensive one, just in case I need to do any tweaks. So there's our picture again. So any questions about flatbed scans? Now, there is something on the back side of this picture. And again, I use a piece of paper usually, if I can find one, to lift this off so I don't get my fingers on the glass surface. But here's the front side of that. Now there's some information on the back side to include the photographer and to include my name and the name of the other gentleman that was standing there with me. So we're going to do a little different thing here. We're going to scan in the back side of that. And I'll do a preview again. And again, I'm scanning this in quicker than I would normally. And because I had this auto rotated the last time we scanned, it's in that orientation. So we don't have to, we could change it to the way it originally looked on the scanner, or we can rotate it for ease of use. Now I'm going to bring these crop guidelines down and up, so it's not going to have to be as big a picture. Now here, look at these options that we have under output now. Now we might want to scan this in as a PDF and save it as a document. But when you do PDF, notice what comes up at the bottom. It comes up that says, do you want to scan this in as an OCR file? That's optical character recognition, which means that if we want to change anything on here, we don't have to type all this in ourselves. We can just open this with Microsoft Word when it scans it, or whatever word processing program you all use. So that's kind of a neat feature on this, and a lot of scanners have that option. We can do multi-page, so we could scan several pages. We can do a date and a time and a copyright. So this opens up a lot of different things. Let's go ahead and scan that. And again, it's going to take a minute to calibrate and scan. and it's going to say, I didn't change the name on this. I don't know if you can see this overlay that came up. It says, do you want to overwrite the other file that I scanned? Well, I don't want to overwrite that. I'm going to say no. So it's going to open up another option, and I'm going to say, let's say new. So that'll scan that as a new file. Now at the bottom of this screen, and for those of you that aren't real patient about what's happening like me, it tells you whether it's finished or not. It'll tell you, it'll calculate up in a percentage and say it's 50% done, 75% done, 100% done. So now this came up and this saved this. I'm going to have to bring up this other file over here if I can. I'm going to stop sharing this screen and share another screen with you all. So now down at the bottom here, can you see these geared wheels, and it tells you how it's saved it. It saved one as a PDF and it saved one as a text. Now, the reason you don't see what's there is because I'm showing you these in a photo browser, and the photo browser only recognizes image files. It doesn't recognize a PDF file. It doesn't recognize a text file. However, I could open these files with either a word processing document or with Adobe Reader. So let's go back here. So any questions about that? Does that make sense for scanning a document and a print in black and white?
Mhm. Yes.
Now, the only
Yes,
thing
yes.
the thing we would do differently than for a color document is if we're using view scan, or if you're using Hewlett Packards or Canons or Epsons, somewhere in their software, they have this option to say, what are you scanning? What am I scanning? You can say auto. I prefer to be specific. So we could go down for a color print and just say color. So we've got color print, black and white print, color text, black and white text, or you can use auto. And again, I would suggest that you tell it specifically rather than letting it default to auto or choosing auto. So
how do you attach it so that it, like the back attaches to the front of the picture?
well, actually, you could do that in a PDF document. I'm not sure. You might be able to do it in a multi-page. If you can see my screen here where I'm on output, it says JPEG multi-page. I think that's how that would take care of multi-page if you're doing that. If you have Adobe Reader, though, you can always edit and make as many pages as you want for a PDF file, but this is how you do it for a JPEG then. All right,
Perfect,
so
thank you.
let's look at, I'm going to change my input. Now, I don't know if you can see my scanner over here, but I'm going to lift the lid up. And on the underside of the lid with flatbed scanners, there's typically a white baffle or a white board. And I'm going to take that off. So this is the white board that fits under the lid of the Epson scanner. And that's the side that goes against the top. What this does is it tells the scanner that you're scanning a print or a document. When you take that off, it reveals a light source. So now we can scan negatives or slides. And again, I'm doing this all on a flatbed scanner. I've already preloaded a strip of negatives. You should all be able to see this. And when you're doing a flatbed scanner, you want the emulsion to go up on a slide or a negative. And the emulsion is always the dull side. The shiny side goes down. And if you don't know which is which, when you hold the negative, if you're reading the numbers backwards, you've got it right. So numbers backwards up and emulsion side up. Now in this particular scanning, this is a template or a holder for 35 millimeter slides, these big openings here, and you can do 2 strips of negatives. I know what type film I used for this, and I'll show you in a minute what happens when we do that, but this is keyed. The holder is keyed, so it only goes in one way. In this particular scanner, which is an Epson 600, it has an A, B, and a C, and on the side there's an A, B, and a C slot. So in this case, I'm doing negatives, so I put the A slot in the A slot for negatives. And now we're going to go back to, let's see here. We're going to go back to our Epson 600. We're going to change our mode from flatbed to transparency. And transparency covers both color negatives, and it covers black and white negatives, or it covers microfilm or slide film. Well, this is a color negative film. And again, let's not, well, I'm going to scan this in at the lowest color setting, which is 24-bit RGB. I'm going to scan this in at the lowest resolution. If I were scanning in this picture, which I've actually already scanned this picture in and printed it, it's of my wife and my daughters and my granddaughter, I would scan this in probably at 3200 DPI if I wanted to print a good 8x10 or 11x14. But for purposes of illustration here and for in the interest of speed, we're going to do this at 400 DPI. I'm going to say no rotation. And again, as I mentioned last week, when I'm scanning in something important, I will do 2, 3, or 4 passes, meaning the scanner is going to go over that negative or over that slide 2 or 3 times. For the interest in time, we're just going to do 1. Now, this is, we have to name this something different. We're going to go to the same destination. We're going to do my scans for class destination, but I'm now going to call this something else. This was a picture I took in August of this year in Loveland, Colorado, of family. So we're going to call this Loveland. Actually, I'm going to call this 2020 Loveland _ 001 plus. Now that means if I want to scan all 4 of these, it will give the first one it scans a number 1, the second one number 2, the third one number 3, fourth one number 4, because I've told it to. I've told it this little plus at the end of my numerical sequence means that it will auto number, which is a very handy feature. So let's say save this to that scan. And now if I don't have to reset this all, let's do a preview. Oh, I forgot something. I'm going to cancel out of this. Totally forgot something that you need to see. This takes a while to cancel. But it started to scan the preview. If we look over at crop, we've got a couple of options. We can do the crop size of a 35 millimeter film. We can do auto, or we can say default options. I'm going to just say default options. On filter, this is, somebody had asked me about little specks and dust on negatives or on slides. And I didn't bring my rubber blower bulb in here, but I would have one typically by me. The other thing I wanted to show you, this is called a loop. It's a magnifier, and these are available online or at stores. This particular loop is designed so that if you have a light box or if you're looking at this on a table or up against the light and you set it right on top of a 35 millimeter slide or a negative, it will magnify it 2 or 4 times and you can see the negative, whether it's sharp. You can also read the writing on the negative. So when I'm scanning, I usually wear this around my neck so I can look and see what negatives or slides are. So it's an LOUPE. This particular one was a Nikon one that I got many years ago, and I still use it. So on this filter, there's something called infrared clean. Infrared clean takes care of dust spots and dirt on negatives or slides. And almost every scanner out in the market today with their software has something called either digital ICE, ICE, or this infrared clean, which is the same thing. ICE is infrared clean. So I would turn that on when you're doing slides or negatives.
Okay. I found this on the web for his infrared.
And then restore fading and restore colors. Because this is a brand new negative, it's only 2 months old, I don't really need to restore colors, but I'll leave that checked. And then sharpen, I might turn on sharpen, grain reduction, and we don't need that too heavy. Here's the thing that is really nice for you all. Down here it says Kodak. That's the type film I used. The next one down says, what type of Kodak film is it? And if you look at this whole list, we've got everything from the old Advantix down to Vericolor. I'm going to use Portra because that's the film that I used. And then the next one down says what type of Portra we're using. And if for those of you that go back to film days and remember Kodacolor 100 or Kodacolor 400, this is the same thing. This is Portra 800. Whoops, wrong one. Portra 800. And then down here it says the color space. Now, if you remember last week, I mentioned if you print your own negatives or print your own slides or prints, you want this color space to be the same as you output on your printer or that you edit with. When I open up something in Photoshop or Affinity or Luminar or any other editing program, I open this up as Adobe RGB. So I'm consistent from my camera or my scanner all the way through to my printing. And then the output, I think we already did this. Whoops, we've got to change this. This is now Family 2020 Loveland. And I think I'll leave it at that. Now, I'm not going to do an OCR or a PDF. I'm just going to do a JPEG. And up at the top here where it says printed size, Epson and Canon and HP all have recommendations for their print dots per inch. Epson typically says 300 or 360, so you notice I have this set for 360. For those of you that might have Canon printers, Canon says 240. So I would set that for 240 if I intended this to someday go to a Canon printer, but I'm going to set this for what I use. And we'll go back to input and make sure that we've got everything set the way we want. And now we can do a preview. And hopefully that'll override that last preview that I did, which doesn't look very good. So this is the worst part of scanning is waiting for either a preview to happen or for the actual scan to happen. Just be prepared if you're scanning things at high resolution, the scanners go much slower. And if you're doing 2 passes, it goes that much slower. So be prepared to put in some serious time into doing this, but it's well worth the results. Now, because those negatives are so small, it's taking a longer time. So we're still previewing here. Any questions while this is doing its thing? And just remember, some of you are muted. So if you have a question and I don't answer it because I can't hear. Well, maybe in the interest of time, I should show you the actual output of what this looks like. Let's go back over to This is actually what the scan looks like. And I didn't have the negative in there straight exactly, but that's a scan of a picture that I took, not digital, but on film 2 months ago. And I had the negatives developed by a lab. I didn't have them make prints because I wanted to do my own scans. And let's see, I think I just came up with what I was going to show you. So I'm going to go back to that. Okay, so now you see the view scan image of 4 negatives. Can you all see that? I hope.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
now realize what's happening here. And you remember a few minutes ago, I said about the acting like a light meter in a camera. If you see these negatives that all look rather dull, it's because that cropped area is the area where it's reading the light. So what we need to do is to set this cropped area just around the negative we want to scan. And you'll see what happens in just a minute when I get that down to that negative. You could all see that brighten up real quickly.
Yeah.
So that's why you want to set these crop guides, because if you don't set the crop guides properly, it's going to take a light reading off of the adjacent area or the area of the frame itself, and you won't get a real accurate exposure. Now, the other thing is, I can't really see this. It's too small. So let's rotate it with these rotate guides at the bottom right, and let's magnify it. So now we can see what we want to scan, and we can move this around, and we can set the crop guides a little bit more, and let's see which one I want to do. Well, that's the one I want to do. So I'll just narrow this down just to as exact as I can get it. And you might even want to blow this up bigger so you can see exactly what you're doing. And I can afford to lose a little bit of the edge there, so I don't have to crop it after the fact. And maybe even bring this in a little bit more over there. And then I can say, let's scan this. So now that's going to scan just that one negative. While this is scanning this negative, for those of you that might have ViewScan already or have another scanning software, under crop, there is an option for doing multiple scans. So you can set the crop guide. And for example, if I'm using the Epson software, or if I'm using the ViewScan software and have told it some things that is not built into it, like how each one is a 35 millimeter negative, you can scan 4 or 5, 6 negatives at the same time. And it will follow that. Well, again, in the interest of time, we're not going to scan 4, 5, or 6 negatives. But as soon as this comes up, I will show you what it is just scanned there in this last one. And again, you have to remove this lid on there, or you'll never be able to scan slides or negatives. And I'm embarrassed to say that the first several tries of scanning slides and negatives, I didn't take that off and wondered why I couldn't see anything. So read the instruction manual, or just remember this. Also, remember to put it back on before you want to scan prints, or you'll actually get a scan of the top of the lid of the scanner. You'll just get this metal looking scan. Are there any questions while this is scanning that one negative? Now going, somebody going to say something? Okay. Going back to the color here, and I don't know that I can access this while it's scanning, but okay, here's our, let's see here. Let me call this slide up here and show you what it just scanned, because it just popped up on the screen, but it's not going to show you that. So here's what it just scanned. And it did a really nice job. If you look carefully, maybe I can blow this up a little bit. If you look carefully, there's a little bit of grain. that would go away and the colors would be a little bit more accurate. That's actually pretty good color, really. It was a cloudy day, but it would be more accurate if we scanned it in at a much higher resolution. And it wouldn't look quite as grainy. And if I did 2 passes, it would look absolutely spectacular. So we can scan in our old slides, we can scan in our own negatives, but that's how you scan negatives. And the important part of that, again, is selecting what you are scanning. There are a couple of things we can do up here. There's something called color balance. And suppose we took this picture under tungsten lights. We could actually choose tungsten here for the old type screw-in light bulbs, incandescent or tungsten. If we took it under fluorescent, we could set that. I set this for neutral, but there's a lot of controls in the professional setting over here that you don't get in the basic or the standard. So if you're really wanting critical color, you might consider scanning with the best of the 3 options. And again, they're all built into the software. There's a black point and a white point for those of you that might have some really faded negatives or slides, or if you've got something that's really dark and underexposed, or something that's really bright and overexposed. We can change our brightness. We can change our white point and black point. I tend to leave those at the default setting for my first scans, because generally the software is good enough that it will accommodate variances in exposure on negatives or slides. And again, the output, we've got these options of these are the options. If you want to scan size print, ultimately, if that's what you're scanning this for, is to make a print that's going to be as big as the negative, well, you realize how big 35 millimeter negatives are, so that wouldn't be good for this. I do a fixed DPI, because that means I can probably print this up to 11 by 14 or 16 by 20. But it also gives you some options. If we want to make this into a directly 8 by 10 print, we can choose 8 by 10. And that will choose the resolution. It will calculate that for you to make a decent quality 8 by 10 print. I tend to
So
always, I'm
can I
sorry,
ask you a question about that?
absolutely.
You would use the fixed DPI if you were scanning negatives or slides?
Yes,
And then what if you were scanning a photo? What,
I do the same thing. I do a fixed DPI.
Oh. all the time?
Yeah, all the time.
Okay.
And I haven't had any, I guess, reasons not to do that. I've never seen something that doesn't come out nice. Where the critical part is, I think, about what your underlying question is up front here. And I'm back on the first page on the input. This is the critical part, the scan resolution. The other one is the output. But
Okay.
I wouldn't scan this particular slide in, or a negative in at 400 DPI, because that's just, I mean, that would make probably a 2 by 3, that would make a passport size photo not look bad. But if I ultimately want a nice print of this, if I'm going to print this picture of my wife and daughters and granddaughter, I want something that's going to be nice and fine detailed. So I'd probably scan this in a minimum of 1600 DPI and most likely 3200 DPI. 6400 DPI is sort of overkill for this. But, you know, again, that's up to you all, what you plan on doing with these pictures. The more digital data that you have, the more digital information you've got, the better quality image you've made. You can always downsize a digital image. It's very hard to upsize. And that goes for those of you that use digital cameras. If you get into the insides of the digital cameras, the settings in the menu, you know that they have several different quality settings. The lowest quality gives you tons more pictures. The highest quality gives you fewer pictures, but it's a much better image. So if you're traveling to Europe, weigh that. Do you want millions of low quality pictures, or do you want several fewer but the best quality? And it's the same with scanning. And let's see what else we might look at here. So destination, title it. And if you notice down at the bottom here, we've got something called options. We could turn that on and just say scan the next one, scan the next one, or scan the next one. I tend to scan negatives individually, so I would move this over to the next one here to scan the next one then. And the reason I do that is I just have not had a lot of real success batch scanning and getting the pictures absolutely cropped perfectly. I've always had a difficult time with that. And you know, if you don't mind cropping after the fact in another program, that's fine. I just soon do one at a time and get it cropped perfectly that way. It takes a little bit longer, but it makes it a lot nicer to not have to crop after the fact. So again, we could crop all 4 of these pictures at once and possibly not get them all lined up perfectly, or you can crop them, scan them one at a time. The other thing about this is we might find some pictures that aren't nicely focused. So we might not want to scan those anyway. You might not want to scan every picture. All of these pictures look pretty good. So I would go through and I would scan each one. And just in case you're wondering, this is a statue back here. It's not a person leaning over. Somebody asked me once, why is that person standing there in every picture you took? Well, it's a bronze statue. This is at the Benson Sculpture Garden in Loveland, Colorado. So any questions about these scans so far? All right, I'm going to take that out now. And unfortunately, the negatives are sandwiched in there. There's a piece that flips out here and sandwiches the negatives. Not so with slides. With slides, you have to put this on the scanner first and then lay the slides down on top of that because they'll just fall out the bottom. Basically what it is a guide. So let's look at 2 scans. And again, when you're scanning slides, typically there's a front side and a back side. The side with Kodak and with Agfa and Fujichrome, the side that has the writing on it, the film type, is the emulsion side. And you can look at that to verify that by looking at it against the light, and typically it curves down. It's a little more dull and there's a little relief on it. But for scanning on flatbed scanners, we always want to have the emulsion up. You can always flip it around after the fact, post-processing, but there's something about light scatter that doesn't happen as much from the top side as it does from the shiny side. So there's all sorts of reasons why you want to scan it the right way. So now this one has a tab here for negatives and it has a tab here for slides. So what that does is it always keeps the open part directly under the light part of your lid on your scanner. So if you notice that this is in the center this way, and now when I turn it over this way, the negatives are in the center. So that's where you want it to be. And I'm going to put my slides there face up. And we'll shut the lid. And again, you have to take that top off for the lid. Now, we have to go back and start all over. So this is why when you're doing scanning projects, I would suggest you do all slides, all negatives, and all prints, just so you can keep going and we don't have to start all over and do this process again. The other thing is if you're doing slides or if you're doing negatives, try to have all Ektachromes, all Kodachromes, all Fujichromes, all one type, so that when we go over here and we say transparency, and then we go down to color slide film. And again, I'm going to do these at 400 DPI. And we're going to change this now to Kodachrome. And here's our options here. We can do a generic film type with slides, or we can do Kodak. And under Kodak, we have a choice of Ektachrome, Kodachrome, copy film, or reversal film. And then we have a choice of what type of film it is specifically. And then my output again, we're going to do this 360 DPI. It's going to go to the same destination as the first one. And now we're going to call this San Diego 1985, because they were some slides that I took when I was at a convention in San Diego in 1985. And let's make sure we've got all this done. Now, for sure, if I was scanning these slides, I would do 2 passes. I would set this for 3200 DPI or custom in 4000 DPI. I just like 4000 DPI. And I'm going to say none. And actually, that was a suggestion that somebody made to me once. So the crop, again, we're going to go to the default options and see if that'll do this without having to change around everything. And let's see if we can get a preview here. Maybe I didn't change my title. Oh, I didn't. We're going to have to call this. Okay, so there's my title. And now let's say preview. And hopefully this will not take too long. One glitch I found in software is somewhere if you're doing all prints, or if you're doing all negatives, sometimes you have to turn the scanner off and turn it back on just so it sort of resets for the next type. That doesn't happen all the time. So we'll see if we can just go right into the preview of a slide now. And again, you can do this with Canon scanners, Hewlett-Packard scanners, or Epson scanners using their software. This is just so much more versatile because of the ability to set specific film types and the many options that we've got. So hopefully this is coming up soon. Now I am told, actually, there's a ViewScan newsletter that comes out periodically, and you can sign up for that. I think I mentioned that last week. But that somebody asked a question in the last newsletter, can you run multiple scanners at the same time? And the answer was yes. I've never done that before. I've never scanned prints on one scanner and slides on another one. Typically, I just kind of dedicate my time to one scanner and one type of whatever I'm doing. So this says it's about 50% done there, if you can follow that at the bottom. Scanning slides and negatives takes the longest time because they're the smallest, and it's doing a bigger job of up-resing them. All right, so I forgot that I had magnified. For those of you that just saw what happened, if you can see my guides here, I forgot that I had magnified that so big, and I was sitting waiting for it to come up. Well, it's there, but it was way over on the other side of the screen. So this is what it looks like. Now, I'm going to scan just this one right here. This is a Kodachrome. And again, notice what happens with the color when I get those crop guides just over the area that's to be scanned. You'll see that the color is much better. And we're going to rotate this and blow this up a little bit so we can see it. So that's looking out in the Pacific Ocean. And let's slide this in a little bit. Now, again, if we go under the crop here, we've got an option of doing, where is it? We can do multi-crops. And if we go to the beginning here, we can do multiple slides at once. It'll give you that option. But that would take us a long time. So let's just scan this one. And let's go back to the original size. There's how it would look if I hadn't blown that up at all. It would probably be in this orientation. So now I'm going to say, let's scan this, and we'll scan just that one Kodachrome slide. We've set it for Kodachrome, and it's going to set the colors accordingly. For me, that's always been the big issue is are the colors true? And if you've ever seen old slides that are faded at all, it's just amazing what this will do to restore those colors. And I think while that's scanning, I'm going to flip over to show you something that I think I showed you last week, but you get an appreciation for what it'll do. If I can find it. So these are Kodachromes. This is a Kodachrome from 1954. And that's basically straight out. I didn't Photoshop this at all. That's straight out of the scanner. And that's the colors that are restored, as are these other pictures. Those are the original colors, which look pretty good. And I think I scanned these in at 4,000 DPI with 2 passes. So that's, and again, these are slide scans. It's my wife in actually 1979. That was a Ektachrome slide. And these are Kodachromes. This is an Ektachrome. And these are color negative scans. So I specifically told it, whatever type this was, it was either Vericolor or Kodacolor 100 because it was a bright sunny days. So I got nice, beautiful colors. But that's one of the advantages. These look to me very much like I remember the originals looking. And they're fine details. So we could blow these up and we could print them somewhere. So now what just came up here, I'm going to stop that sharing and go back and show you the slide scan that just came up on my screen. And we need to rotate this because it scanned it. So there's our slide scan. And that's straight out of the camera. It was a gray overcast day. If we blow that up, even at 400 DPI, if we blow this up, I think that looks pretty good. It would look much better had we scanned it in at a much higher resolution, but it did a really good job. So what questions do you have? Those were the 3 types I wanted to show you today. Any questions about the specifics of how we scan those or something unrelated? And remember, you might be muted.
I'm sure that once I start scanning, I'll have all kinds of questions. But
Yep.
right now I don't.
Okay. Well, again, that book, if you're using ViewScan, this is a worthwhile addition. I'm not sure that I don't know that there's a comparable Epson book. I've never seen one, or Hewlett-Packard or Canon. But if you're using Epson or ViewScan software on any of those printers, that book helps. Now, the other scanner that's a possibility, let's see if I can open this scanning software up. Just real quickly, I'll show you that Epson software. Let's see if I can bring this up. So this is the little automatic scanner that I found about 2 months ago or a month ago, and it's showing everything that's in a folder. But I don't know if there's any of you that are the British science fiction fans of Doctor Who, but I took my wife and 2 children at the time to a Doctor Who convention in Chicago in 1982, I think. And I just found this in the past week or 2, which is an autographed ticket from Doctor Who. Now, the nice thing about this little automatic scanner is that I can just drop it into the scanner behind me. And imagine that I've got 20 of those different ones. I've got pictures, I've got pieces like that. I can just go in and say, start scanning. I need to see where this is going to go. I'm going to send this to, okay, that's going to the scanners. And we're going to call this Doctor Who #2. And we'll say, do we want to do any enhancements? This Epson software actually has some built-in enhancements. And it gives us an option of doing front and back. And then we can say start scanning. And if I turn it on, it will scan that picture. And it will ask us at the end of that scan, I think it'll ask us if we want to do any more. So we can scan another batch, or we can say we're done scanning, and that's going to save it to where I directed it to save. And now I've got these 2 pictures that I just did. Can you see those upside down?
Yes.
I think, okay, so we're going to go over to my folder here, and we'll show you that folder.
Remind me of the name of that scanner again, John, please.
That's an Epson Fast Photo 6. It's called an FF680W. So what you should see now you should see these 2 tickets. One is original yellow, and the other is what it thought it should do as far as post-processing is concerned. So it's showing you that, but it did a nice job of scanning that. It even sets the, if it's crooked a little bit, it sets it straight. And I haven't quite figured out how to use the ViewScan software with that newest scanner that I've got. I will eventually use the ViewScan software for that, because it just has enough tweaks that if I'm scanning old prints it won't scan negatives or slides. It only scans prints. But it's got enough enhancements that if I'm scanning color prints, I'd like to be able to set the color exactly. But the Epson software is actually very adequate for that. So these are just various things that I've scanned using the flatbed scanner. This was a Kodachrome slide. And this one here, if I can bring that up. This is an Ektachrome slide that I did earlier today. Again, it's at very low resolution, but that's from about 1980, I would say. And there was, I took this under a tree looking at the church, and we can actually, you can fix things like this for those of you that do any post-processing at all. We could actually go through here and use the healing brush tool in Photoshop and just get whatever this is out of here. And then we could do other tweaks to this. So that's a scan from 40 years ago, and I did it again in very low resolution, so the color's not as rich as it would be if we had done this at the best resolution. And again, I would suggest that those of you that are scanning slides or negatives consider doing it using better quality. So better quality scan resolution. The preview resolution is really irrelevant. I mean, if you know that you've got a decent quality slide or negative, and you might verify that by using something like a loop like this, we could just set that for auto for the preview resolution. But for the scan resolution, again, I would go up here around 3200 DPI, and I would do at least 2 scan passes for slides or negatives. You'll just be very, very happy with the results. I don't know if I've got some, well, I can actually show you some nice quality scans. Real quickly, if I can. I know we're running near the end of our time here, but let's see here. Can you all see this group of shelves with plates?
Yes.
Yes.
That's from the Armour estate in Lake Forest that I took in October of 1981 on slide film, or that was black and white film. This is slide film. But I was recently asked, as I mentioned last week, that's their bathroom in the Armour estate. But I was asked recently by an author if I still had these pictures and could he use them for a book that's coming up. The sister of David Adler is the woman that decorated the interior of the Armour estate in Lake Forest, and it was an architectural project. But I did a combination of Ektachrome, and this is one of the black and whites. And these are scans. So this is a scan of a black and white negative. I don't have any black and white. You all know what black and white negatives look like. But the detail is beautiful. I was very happy with these after so many years. I was fortunate that my wife, the librarian, could find these in a moment's notice. When the fellow asked me if I still had them, I said yes, not knowing whether I did or not. But I don't throw any negatives away. But these are all scans from that house. So you can see it's a valuable skill to learn, I think, whether it's for your own edification, for your own preserving family memories, if you're doing genealogy things, it's just, it's well worth doing, scanning things that you find important. Again, these are old scans. If that, is that screen showing?
Yeah.
So I do front and back on these, as I mentioned last week. So these are all my grandfather in 1917. So, and some of them I haven't worked with at all. This picture actually could be rebuilt in Photoshop if someone cared to spend the time. I may do it at some point. I may rebuild this area here that's torn. This part, the tears in this are very easy to fix in Photoshop. You basically just drag the healing brush across them and it will fix it to the point where the viewer really can't tell that that was a torn picture. Something like this we can enhance a little bit, but I like to leave some of these in the original form because it's got writing that I presumably my great-grandmother or my grandmother wrote on here. And that sort of makes the pictures endearing. But some of these go back to probably 1870. And some of them are kind of recent. I also scan documents and prints. This is actually a picture of my father in the early 1950s. And C. Everett Koop, the Surgeon General, eventual Surgeon General, was in this panel with my father. So there's some historical things that are fine. My father was also, he was an obstetrician. He was also on a panel with Masters and Johnson, and I have those pictures. So for me, it's a lot of important things. I scan in documents. This is my grandfather who got married in Norristown, Pennsylvania in 1917. So I add these to my genealogy files. But there's a lot to scan. What questions can I answer? I think we're kind of running out of our time here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I hope this gives you some ideas on how to get started. If you have any questions, please email me. I'd be happy to help you there.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Just anxious to get
Thank
started.
you.
Yeah, it's going to be a good winter for scanning.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes.
You all take care.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.